So when we're looking at this thing, a tier 1 employee, this is someone who has really high core values and really high productivity. A tier 2 employee is someone who's going to have really high core values but low productivity. Tier 3 is going to be a low core values and high productivity, and this is low and low. Before we kind of get to the other ones, this one's pretty self-explanatory, right? If you have employees that are working inside of your company right now that have low core values and low productivity, you have to get rid of them. It's a non-negotiable. We're not going to spend any more time, energy, and effort training them, right? Hoping, right? Hiring hope. We're just going to say like, hey, my bad, this isn't working out. And we're just going to move those people on, right? So we're just going to move these people out, right? And by the way, if you start bringing in a lot of low core values and low energy people and low productivity, this is a massive hiring issue. And we got to start looking at how we're hiring a little bit better, because those people really shouldn't fall through the cracks. You should see them coming from a mile away. Specifically when you start to have higher standards of core values and productivity. Like, I always like to look at the hiring process if I see a company with a lot of these people in there. Okay, so in this video, we're going to talk about how people equals product, okay? And how having really good people in your business is going to cause you to have a really great product. But first, we have to identify what good looks like and what not so good looks like. So I'm going to go over to my board here and jam on this for you guys for a little bit. Let's get some clean space here for you. So the biggest thing that we want to look for when it comes to employees, and this is something that it took me a while to learn, but the biggest thing is that like when an owner is trying to go from like a producer role and treating all the time to eventually like more of a manager role. And eventually what's going to happen is that you're going to have a manager. That manager is going to try to move into more of a communicator role where you're using more of your mouth to make your money. This is where a lot of owners would kind of call this networking or negotiations, where you're negotiating different contracts or whatever that looks like, you know, leases, rent, insurance contracts, so on and so forth, supply ordering, right? So communicator role. And then eventually you're going to go from communications into operator, and you're going to be looking to open up more locations. But in order to do this and go fast with it, the biggest thing that we have to understand is that we need good people. And ideally what it comes down to is there's kind of like these 4 quadrants of hiring, or 4 quadrants of kind of like your team and identifying what you have. There's tier 1 employees, there's tier 2s, there's going to be tier 3 employees, and then there's going to be tier 4. And what we're trying to do in most of our businesses is that the more we can get into this first quadrant here, that's going to determine how good your product is, period. Because if you start to get more of these people in, and then eventually what's going to happen is you're going to hit this ultra high tier 1. This is going to be known as your leadership team. Okay. So what we want to be able to figure out here is, you know, what does each one of these break down into, and what can you do to identify, you know, do I have good people working for me? So this is an exercise that I love to do. I basically sit down on like a monthly basis and I put my quadrants up and I start plotting some of my employees, and I start to see like who needs a little bit more training, who needs a little bit more, maybe it's productivity training. Some people might need like culture, core value, setting proper expectations training. Some people just need a re-onboarding altogether. And some people need demotions or dismissals, right? And it is okay, right? So, but we have to be able to identify what we have inside of our business. So when we're looking at a tier 1 employee, when we're looking at kind of the continuum here, is this is going to be core values, and then this is going to be productivity. And for everybody, productivity is whatever you define it as, what KPIs you use. You should be very clear on what good looks like. So let's just say we're talking about like a producer or physical therapist. We want to see how efficient they are, some of their coding stuff, right? Are they getting the arrivals, right? Do we get reviews, referrals, some of that stuff? So there's production here. And then, but we also want to know like what kind of person they are. And core values, a lot of people and a lot of owners we see don't even have clearly defined core values, or they don't have clearly defined productivity standards. So if you're lacking either one of those two, we have to get super clear on what good core values looks like. Great example. We have owners all the time that like, hey, I put a rule in place that our therapists need to get their notes done within 24 hours, right? They need to get their notes done 24 hours, right? So instead of having a core value or a value-based business, they have a rule-based business, right? You know, we have a rule in place that when a referral comes in, we have to call them in 5 seconds or whatever this It's like, okay, speed, right? Speed the lead, right? So there's a lot of rules being put in businesses, but a value-based business, right? One of your core values could just be like speed is king, right? Every single thing that we do here inside of our company has to have some kind of speed behind it, or, you know, communication is queen, or like quality assurance is God, like whatever it is, right? But you have values there, right? Do one more, you know, sweep the shed, whatever it takes, right? No client, no patient left behind, like whatever your values are inside of your business, like like you want to make sure that you're setting those up to be very clear. A lot of times, just real quick before we move on, is I see people do their core values and then they'll do like, our brand is in power, and they're like E stands for an M and P. Like, don't do that. So the reason for that is because you're boxing in the core values based on a name. You should basically just ask your team, like, what does good look like from a good employee, and then pull out the key characteristics and then make them into like fun phrases, and that could be your core values, right? So just want to make sure that these are things that like are non-negotiables. Productivity is just like in the position, right? So when you look at the role or you look at the department, what are the KPIs that we need to hold people to, right? So we have like a whole training on just breaking down like the KPIs that people need to be responsible for per department. And you don't need 100 KPIs. You just need like one or two. And these one or two metrics are what they can control, because I can't hold someone accountable for metrics that they're not really in control of, right? Or specifically getting bonused on. So when we're looking at this thing, a tier 1 employee, this is someone who has really high core values and really high productivity. A tier 2 employee is someone who's going to have really high core values but low productivity. Tier 3 is going to be a low core values and high productivity, and this is low and low. Before we kind of get to the other ones, this one's pretty self-explanatory, right? If you have employees that are working inside of your company right now that have low core values and low productivity, you have to get rid of them. It's a non-negotiable. We're not going to spend any more time, energy, and effort training them, right? Hoping, right? Hiring hope. We're just going to say like, hey, my bad, this isn't working out, and we're just going to move those people on, right? So we're just going to move these people out, right? And by the way, if you start bringing in a lot of low core values and low energy people and low productivity, this is a massive hiring issue, and we got to start looking at how we're hiring a little bit better, because those people really shouldn't fall through the cracks. You should see them coming from a mile away, specifically when you start to have higher standards of core values and productivity. Like, I always like to look at the hiring process if I see a company with a lot of these people in there. Now, the hard part about it is that we do work with clinic owners that have a lot of 3s and 4s working in their company. So sometimes a 4 could look like a 3, or sometimes a 3 could look like a 2 or a 1, because there's nothing else to compare to. But when we do have a rock star that comes in on a future hire, after we do get very clear on the expectations, it's like, oh, that's what that looks like. Okay, so just be careful if you do have some of these people floating around. Now, I'm going to come up here to this level. Someone that has high core values, right? They love the company. You ask them to do anything, they'll do it for you, right? But for whatever reason, they're just not super efficient at their job, right? We have a lot of visionaries maybe that we hire, and they're not really good at integrating or doing the work, whatever that looks like. Or you're training them up. They just need some more training. They just need some more mentorship. They need some of that stuff, a little bit more nurturing. So it just depends on how much time, energy, or effort you want to pour into these people. I will say this though, usually when we do train these people and pour into them, 80% do become tier 1 employees, but we do have about 20% that just kind of stay stuck as a high core value, low productivity individual. And we just have to ask ourselves, is what their productivity is, are we okay with that, right? And what I mean by that is you might set a productivity standard at like, hey, like good here looks like 86% or higher clinic efficiency. These people might be rocking at like a 75 or 80% no matter what they do. They just can't get 100%. They can't get to that 86 level. They're just a couple of ticks underneath it. But is that enough to be like, yo, you can't work here anymore? I don't know, right? Usually because they have good core values, until we could get somebody else in here, they usually stay stuck at that level. No matter how much training we do, we just have to ask ourselves, how much are we willing to, I don't want to say put up with or tolerate, but you guys get the idea. Then what we're going to have is these people down here, okay? Our tier 3s. These are the individuals that are super high productivity. They probably could do the job of 3 people, right? They're running laps around the other employees. However, they let everybody know about it, okay? These individuals are highly productive, but they let everybody know that if you fire them, the place is going to go to heck. So these are highly productive people, but they have core value issues. They're kind of like, I hate using the term, but they're kind of like energy vampires, right? They always got issues, patient issues around them, staff issues, but they're so productive that you start to believe what they say, right? We got to do this. This person's not pulling their weight. Like, they're making mistakes. They're blah, blah, blah. And you just start listening to them and you're like, yeah, these other people do stink. But what's happening is this person here is starting to suppress your 2s and your 1s. Maybe not so much the ones because they're smart enough to understand that like what this person's doing kind of thing, but they're definitely suppressing your twos. And sometimes your twos aren't able to get to a one because of this. Also, just a really quick heads up, never, and I mean never, promote a tier 3 into a leadership position. It will kill the culture of your company. So really, really important there. Never promote a tier 3 employee into a leadership position because it will destroy anything that you have left of the culture. I know that for a fact. So we want to start looking here. However, the thing is, and I'll cover it in a little bit before we move into tier 1s, is I always look at like an employee. So either a tier 2, right? A tier 3. Now 4s I'm already going to just remove, right? But when I'm specifically looking at a tier 2 and 3, I always ask myself, did I set proper expectations for the role with this individual? So do they know what core values look like? Good core values, good productivity? Do they know that information? Because if they don't know what good looks like from a core value or productivity standpoint, right, it's really hard for me to sit here and be like, you know, this person's not doing what they're supposed to be doing. So I get very clear on expectations. The other thing is I want to know if I'm holding them accountable. Okay. So accountability to me, okay, kind of like the way I look at it is that like, did I set expectations? Are we measuring, right? That's why we use a lot of KPIs and metrics and scorecard sheets for a lot of employees. And then I want to make sure that we're also giving proper feedback. Okay. And feedback is weekly. And that's going to be recognition. It's going to be praise. It's going to be coaching, or it's going to be a hard conversation, right? A lot of feedback loops here. And if I go to an employee that's not performing and I can't say that I set expectations and I can't say that I'm holding them accountable, well, then I can't say that I have a team member issue, right? Some of these guys just need to get re-onboarded and then they're good, but I have to get super clear on what I want them to look like. So a lot of times what happens is we don't necessarily have team member issues. We have an issue where the owner's producing and they're not really able to pour in and manage people to set those proper expectations and accountability. So we get a little frustrated. But with that being said, that's why we want to surround ourselves when we're hiring with tier 1s, okay? Because tier 1s, these are kind of like your doers, right? These are your go-getters. These are your integrators, right? These are the people that have high core values and they have high productivity, right? So if you are stuck in a production role, you want to surround yourself with these people because they're going to do whatever it takes to help you get better, right? These are your problem solvers. What problems do you have? They'll solve them, right? And the more we can get into this category, and then eventually you're going to have your high core values, super high productivity. That's eventually going to be your leadership team because these are like the ones that exemplify what you want as a company. So just to recap here, what I highly recommend is sit down after this video, kind of put your quadrants together and then list all your employees here. And then what I would like you to do is just plot those employees on the graph wherever you see, and then you'll get a really good idea of first and foremost, right? Who's your tier 1s and 2s? Who's your 3? Who's your 2, who's your 4, and then you'll also be able to see, do I have more, 2, 3s, and 4s in my business versus 1s? And then if you have more 1s than these guys, then you have a good business, at least you should. And if you have more 2, 3s, and 4s, there's a reason why you're not full. Okay, so hopefully this video is informative for you guys. If you have any questions on this, just throw it in the comments or the chat. I'll see you on the next one.